This is a log. This is a log from a monkey puzzle tree. It looks pretty rank, it looks pretty rotten from the outside, but actually what's inside is really, really nice looking wood. This section of tree is actually shortly going to become a very famous character from Tolkien's Middle-earth. Features very heavily in Lord of the Rings and in The Hobbit, and you'd recognise him instantly. So you may have guessed it's going to be Gollum. So I have to think about the figure within the wood. I've got to think about the pose, the gravity, how he sits within the wood, the proportions. I may be able to use this section here. We've got quite an interesting branch that came off there. There's going to be solid wood inside there, but I think I can possibly use that as part of the sculpture. So when I'm thinking about a sculpture like this, I'm thinking about where the position of the head will be and the overall height and the proportions. That's the first thing that I think about. I'm then going to start to plan it out and map it out. I'll take some large facets off first. You can see here my initial sketch of the pose, and that may have to adapt very slightly depending on what I find in the wood. Of course, wood is very unpredictable, and sometimes you find there's a pocket of rot where you don't want it. You might find that there's a knot where you don't want it. It's simply a case of working my way into the wood, seeing what I find and working with it. Right, so as you can see, at this stage I've got to now, the figure is sort of fully emerged from the wood. I've managed to work out where all the proportions are. I've managed to work it out so that he looks in proportion and is as skinny as Gollum should be. So one of the things about researching the human figure is when you've got an exaggerated human figure like Gollum, it's very, very difficult sometimes to get your head out of the true dimensions of a human form and create exaggerations. Gollum is a little bit like a caricature. He's got a bigger head, he's got big hands and big feet, but a very, very skinny body. So I've had to really exaggerate some of those things, like the skinniness of the legs, and I've got some more to take off on the arms. But what I usually start with is effectively a full figure, and I whittle it down until he loses enough weight to look like Gollum. As you can see, there's no detail in the face yet, and that's going to be the next thing to tackle. One of the things that you need to do when you're working on any kind of humanoid form is you need to be able to carve it so that you get all of those points which are kind of fixed. If I started carving the face too early, it's very, very easy to then realise that I've carved it too far forward, or it's not sitting straight with the neck and where the neck should be. So what I really wanted to do was form the overall head and form where the neck was, so it's a realistic kind of pose, and that would then give me the reference points I need to be able to start carving the eyes and the mouth and the nose. One of the things about carving faces is creating expression. So I really want to create a kind of surprised look. It's more of the look of Smeagol than Gollum. So this is his alter ego. He's grabbed a fish, he's about to eat it, and someone has surprised him, which is why he's turned his head. So I want that kind of real arch to the eyebrows and slightly worried, slightly scared look, and I think that'll really bring him to life. So we're back, day 3 of carving Gollum here, and I've got on really well with him. I'm actually quite pleased. It takes a lot for me to say I'm quite pleased with work that I've done, but I am really pleased with how the pose has worked out with this one. The gravity feels right. One of the things about doing sculpture of any kind of human form or animal is actually getting it to feel like it's on the ground and it feels like it's subject to gravity. So I'm really quite pleased with the way it's worked out with the foot up here and the knee out here. I actually had a big knot on the side of the timber here, which enabled me to push the knee a bit further out than the edge of the log. So I'm at the stage now where I can start really looking at the facial detail. So I've roughed this out with the chainsaw. I've got it to the point where I think the head is about the right size, but it's all refining from here on in. So I'm going to start working into the face now with the die grinders. So I'm using a Milwaukee die grinder. I'm using saber-tooth burr bits. The saber-tooth bits are great. They really enable me to get lots of different shapes and textures. So I should be able to really pick out the eyes and the mouth and those really not very well kept teeth and things like that. So let's crack on and see how it goes. Well, finally finished. Finishing a sculpture is actually quite a difficult thing for me because I tend to look at it and I could carry on forever just doing little bits and pieces, but you have to call it eventually. So I've called it on this one. I'm happy with the pose. I'm happy with the overall appearance, and tiny refinements don't actually need to be done on something like this. It's more like expressionism, where you really get the impact from a distance. So you'll have watched me do these eyes and the face and the facial features here. You'll notice that I really pushed in and created a cavity where the pupil is, and leaving that little bit of wood in the middle gives the impression of a shine. Sculpture is all about illusion of shadow and depth of form. Because we're not seeing the colour image that we're used to, we actually have to over-exaggerate some of these cuts to create separation of form. You'll notice underneath the leather of the, what should we call it, a loincloth, the leather of that, I've actually exaggerated that cut and made it deeper than it would actually be in life. And this gives a little shadow underneath and really helps to separate out that form. Again, with the outline of this leg here, I've cut in much deeper than it would have been, and that just helps to separate out the form. Between the fingers, between the toes, all of these cuts are bigger than they would be in actual life. When you look at your fingers like that, there isn't a very big gap between them. But separating out that form, creating that depth, over exaggerating some of those cuts really brings it to life when you look at it from 10 feet away.